Hello and welcome to our presentation on the Psychometric Portal. The Psychometric Portal is the new standard in online psychometric assessment. If you've been working with a test publisher who won't give you access to certain pieces of your data from respondents once they've entered it onto their system, it's time to change. If you've been working with a test publisher who's unable to allow you to upload your candidates in bulk, it's time to change. If you've been working with a test publisher that always wants to say no, it's time to change. The Psychometric Portal is the new standard in online psychometric assessment, and SiteAsia International and psychometricassessment.com, we are the sole distributors in the majority of countries across Southeast Asia. Those countries include China, Hong Kong, Singapore, Indonesia, Taiwan, the Philippines, Thailand, and more. In Malaysia, we have a joint partnership, and Korea has its own sole distributor. So that's a little bit about the Psychometric Portal. Let's now move on in the next slide in this presentation to tell you what we're going to cover during this presentation. So we are going to introduce to you the Psychometric Portal. You may be wondering what it is. You may not have heard of it before. So we'll introduce it to you and we'll tell you what you can get out of the portal. We're going to show you what assessments are available, and for those assessments, what reports are available. Prepare to be impressed because those reports really look nice. They're very well presented graphically, and behind them they've got excellent reliability and validity. We're then going to show you how this whole thing works. So if you want to get access to it, how you can go about doing that, and we're going to talk about what levels of training and accreditation are required to use the portal. So starting off with the various different assessments that are available, a really good place to start is job analysis. So one thing that I tell people on any of the training courses that I run as a psychologist is that this is where you start. You always start with job analysis. We have people call us and they say they want to use a psychometric test, and our question is, what are the competencies that you want to assess? And you only understand those competencies if you've done a thorough job analysis. There are two ways that you can do it within the Psychometric Portal. One way is the way that you see in front of you right now. So this would be simply looking at various competencies. If you mouse over those competencies, you'll get a really good definition of what each of them means. Then you can choose whether for the job that you are profiling, the job that you're hiring for, those competencies are unimportant, important, or absolutely crucial. And when you select either important or crucial, on this right-hand side where you see the red and the green and the gray, this will light up and it will enable you to move the sliders to show the range of scores that you would expect for somebody that's going to be successful in your role. So you may, for example, want somebody that's highly creative. That's the first example there. So somebody that's scoring between about 7 and 10. This is a STEN range. If you don't know anything about STENs, don't worry, we can train you. But for those of you that do, it's a STEN range. You may, on the other hand, want somebody that doesn't score too high but doesn't score too low either. If you look down to following directions, which is just before the behavior section, you can see here that the indication is that the client would be looking for somebody scoring more in the middle, not somebody that's always out to follow directions, so not somebody scoring very, very high, but also not somebody that doesn't want to follow directions at all. So you can do that yourself. You can send a questionnaire like this to anybody from the portal, and you can get them to complete it, and then you can look at that later on. There's another way of doing this though. If you feel that this way, remember when you mouse over these competencies, a definition is going to show up, but if you feel that that's just a little bit too difficult for people that aren't experienced in this area, there is another thing you can do, and that is that you can actually send them a questionnaire like the one that just popped up on the screen, and that would then basically feed in to the chart that you saw first. So the questionnaire does the assessment for you and sets those STEN ranges, those score ranges for you. So that's a really good place to start, isn't it? You start off with job analysis, you make sure you fully understand the job that you're recruiting for or developing for, and so on. Once you've done that, it makes it much easier to compare your candidate that you've assessed with any kind of a job analysis that you've done. And I'm going to come on to talk about that in just a second. Now, another one of the assessments in the system is called the Quest Profiler, and this is a PTC registered test. So this is the Psychological Testing Centre, which is under the umbrella of the British Psychological Society. So the test has been assessed by chartered psychologists, and it's been registered by the BPS, by their Psychological Testing Centre. The test was designed by chartered psychologists who have extensive test development experience. In fact, one of them in particular worked for the world's biggest testing company. So he got the experience in that company and in other areas, and then of course put that into the design of this assessment. It's a personality assessment, and some of you may know that personality assessments, the questions can be presented in either an ipsative or a normative format. There are pros and cons to both. Ipsative means forced choice, so even if you don't know much about psychometrics, you may remember completing a questionnaire where you are forced to choose between various options, which is most like you, which is least like you. You might have found that frustrating, and that's one of the downsides of the ipsative questionnaires. So candidates do sometimes find it frustrating that they're being forced to choose which from a range of statements or adjectives is most and least like them. The alternative to that is the normative version, where a candidate gets to rate themselves on a scale. So both are available with the Quest Profiler. The downside with the normative version is that candidates tend to present themselves in a better light than they are really. So they make themselves perhaps look a little bit nicer, a little bit better generally. It's called motivational distortion. We all do that, particularly when we're looking for a job. So whatever the theory is behind the ipsative and the normative versions, the point is that you have a choice. You can go for one or the other. It's up to you. If you go for the ipsative version, there is an accuracy indicator. So that will tell you how accurate, how consistent the respondent has been as they've completed the questionnaire. If you go for the normative version, then there's a social desirability measure. So you can assess whether or not the candidate has tended to present themselves in a significantly better light than other people who've completed the questionnaire. The questionnaire assesses 24 aspects or scales or factors of personality, and they're assessed under 4 different headings: people, thinking, feeling, and drive. And for each of those 24 aspects, 24 scales, there are 10 questions. So you've got 240 questions in total in the questionnaire. And the final point there, already mentioned, this test has been assessed by and registered with the British Psychological Society's Psychological Testing Centre. So remember back 2 slides ago when I introduced to you the job analysis that you can do within the system. That's that. Remember that? Well, that job analysis can now feed into what's called a job match report. Why did I put the Quest Profiler between these 2 slides? Because the job match report needs the information from the Quest Profiler. So the Quest Profiler is actually going to assess those characteristics that you rated as important, not important, crucial, and so on. It assesses that by way of its personality assessment and its behavioral assessment. And once your candidate's completed that, you can then go into the system and you can compare multiple candidates. So if you had 100 candidates applying for a job, more than that, less than that, whatever, you can actually compare them all to the job analysis that you did. And this is called the job match. And you'll get something like you see on this screen right now. So where there is a match, across the top there, you've got the competencies that you've selected. And down the left-hand side here, you've got the names of your candidates. Where there is a match, you will see a number. That's a score, and the background will be green, indicating that that's good. And where there is a poor match, the background will be red. So you can see at a quick glance the extent to which the candidates that you've assessed as part of your selection process actually fit the job analysis, the requirements of the job. This, I think you can see immediately how beneficial this is, because very quickly you can get the information you need. You don't need to play around with long, cumbersome personality assessment reports. Everything is going to appear here for you on 1 page or 2 pages, depending upon how many candidates you're assessing. But it's very, very easy to see that and to understand it. And it's actually very economical, because at the Psychometric Portal, the fee to do the job match is actually very, very, very low. You pay more later if you want more detailed information on your candidates. In addition to what you see here, which can be exported as a PDF, an Excel file is also available. So if you would like to make use of the data yourself somehow, you can simply download it in an Excel file. Easy to do. You do it yourself within the system. Some people may have had experience with other systems where you simply can't do that, where you're very limited in terms of what you can download. Don't worry, this system is not one of them. You can download the Excel file. Now let's move on to look at the Quest Profiler reports. What's important to remember here is that you have a choice. You can either start off by assessing your candidate in the regular way for a personality assessment, and then you can choose any of these reports that I'm going to talk about in a moment, or alternatively, you can do the outline that I've just been through. So you could do that job analysis so that you fully understand the job, and then you get a candidate to complete the Quest Profiler. You do the job match, which is very economical. So you could have 200 candidates. You want to shortlist them down perhaps to 20 or so candidates. So those 200 complete the Quest Profiler questionnaire. You pay a very reduced fee for doing the job match because you don't get a full report like you see on this screen. What you get instead is the job match report on the previous screen. And from that job match report, alongside all the other evidence you have about that individual and whether or not they match your competencies, you then decide to put through perhaps 20 or however many you decide. And from those 20, you then go back into the system and you produce fuller version reports from Quest Profiler. Do note that those candidates do not need to complete another test in order for that to happen. They've already completed the Quest Profiler as part of the job match exercise. You've already got their data. It's just a case of now going into the system and producing a more detailed report, for which you're going to pay a little bit more money, of course. So let's have a look at some of these more detailed reports. So first of all, here we have the behavior report. As you can see, you have those 24 scales from the Quest Profiler, and the candidate score on each of those scales will be very clear in the larger version of the page. And on the right hand side of the page, you have interpretation of what that score actually means. So that's the behavior report. Then you can get a leadership style report. I'm sure that's fairly self-explanatory. So the candidate's style of leading others, a team style, so the candidate's preference when working in a team, whether they're perhaps the critical individual, the person that resolves issues or whatever, and a candidate report. The candidate report, it's a really good idea to give feedback of some sort to candidates. The BPS, the British Psychological Society, are quite hot on this as well. And so we always recommend giving something, but we wouldn't really want you to give the behavior report because it's got STEN scores on there, and STEN scores are difficult for some people to understand unless they've been on a training course. So giving them the candidate report, which doesn't have any numbers on it, is probably the best way to go. We also give that same candidate report to people that come to us wanting to use the Quest Profiler but don't have any training in personality assessment, so they can use our bureau service and we'll provide them with a candidate report because it's safer, simply because it doesn't have those STEN scores on it. So 1, 2, 3, 4 different reports there. Those 4 reports added up together form what we call collectively the standard report. So the standard report is, if you like, the next level in terms of cost after the job match. I'm not going to tell you exactly how much because we can talk about that another time. Let's have a look at the next range of reports. We have a preferred culture report. So that's useful finding out whether or not your candidate's likely to fit your culture. A competency report. So we predict the candidate's areas of competency, areas of potential development need on the basis of that behavior report. A sales report, obviously useful if your candidate's going into a sales type role. So what's their preferred selling style? How good are they likely to be in this area? And finally, something that's very useful, an interview report. So that helps you to make your interviewing process more structured, more reliable, more valid. On here, you will have the competency. It's 1 page to a competency, and then there'll be details about the extent to which the candidate's managing that competency well. What are the indicators that they're good in this area? What are the indicators that they're poor in this area? There will be sample questions for you to ask, behavior-based questions, and there's even an area for taking your own notes. So that's all really, really useful to do competency-based interviewing, making your interview process much more reliable, much more valid. Those 4 reports come in addition to the first 4 that I just mentioned, and taken together then 8 reports will form what we call the full report. So that's the next level of reporting. And finally, if you want to go all the way, we can add development feedback. So it's a nice premium development report that's really useful for development scenarios, for developing your candidates. So perhaps when you decide to take them on into the job, you can then give them a report which will help them. It will identify their current strengths, their development needs, and so on. Or perhaps for somebody already in the position, you might want to use this as the basis for working out a development coaching plan and so on. You've probably heard of EQ, emotional intelligence, so that's something that will also appear in this report area. We have a leadership report, which is more detailed than the leadership style report that you see in the first set of reports. There's a conflict report, which tells you how your candidate deals with conflict, their preferred style. And finally, you've probably heard of these types again. So Jungian type, a Jungian type profile report is also available. So if you want all of those 5 that I just went through, plus the 4 from the full report, plus the 4 from the standard report, you're looking in that case for what we call the premium report. So they're the different reporting levels in the psychometric system for the Quest Profiler. In addition to assessing personality, you probably want to assess aptitude, because there's a lot of research evidence out there that supports the utility of aptitude in predicting work performance across a broad range of jobs. So how can we help you there? Well, we can assess at these levels within the system. So managerial professional, supervisory, team leader, clerical and admin, or operative levels. And depending which level you opt for, these are the various different aptitude tests that are available. So verbal reasoning at various levels, numerical reasoning at various levels, mechanical understanding, following instructions, using numbers, word usage, that's obviously some of the more clerical things there, computation, proof checking, cross-checking. So they're the things that are available to us in the range of aptitude tests within the system. This is how it may look for a candidate. Obviously, the screens that they see are going to be different depending upon the exact test that they are completing. And immediately after completion, reports are available to you. So here's an example of a numerical reasoning report. Here's an example of a verbal reasoning report. The reports have fairly much the same structure, so once you're able to understand one of them, you can understand the others, although you do need training to be able to use these independently. That said, we have a psychologist on call service, which means you can basically call us up and get us to handle things for you, and our psychologist will do that. Here's the proof checking test. Let me just show you some of the things. Let's home in on some of the things in this report. So here you're told when the candidate completed the test, how long they took to complete, how many questions are in the test, what the time limit is, how many of those questions were actually attempted by the candidate, and then how many the candidate actually got correct. So that's the initial information for you. And then here you're told how the candidate's actually done. So compared to a group of others, this candidate has scored in the 92nd percentile. It means they've done better than 92% of similar others. It places them in the top 8%. So obviously that's a good score. In addition to the percentile score, there's a STEN score for those of you that understand STENs. And in addition to that, there's a percentage accuracy score right there. At the bottom of the report, there's some written feedback. So it's basically interpreting that report for you and providing you with some developmental feedback, just very brief developmental feedback for your candidate. There's one additional thing I'd like to mention on this slide, and that is that the system actually has something in addition to the aptitude tests called Validate. One problem with aptitude tests, if you are administering them to candidates who are not right in front of you, so remotely, is that you can never be 100% certain that the correct person actually completed that particular test. So if I was a dishonest person and I was applying for a job, let's say in accounting, and my brother is already an accountant, then perhaps I might ask him to complete a numerical reasoning test on my behalf. And then, of course, I get through your first stage of selection and maybe another stage and so on. What Validate does is, at the final stage, you can ask the system to retest the candidate in front of you. So you now have the candidate in front of you. Perhaps they've come down for an interview. You ask the system to retest the candidate on the 6 most difficult questions that they got correct. And the expectation, of course, is that they're going to get them correct again. because they got them correct first time around, why wouldn't they get them correct this time around? If they get one wrong, that's probably not a big deal, but if they get multiple of them wrong, then of course you have to begin to wonder whether the right person actually sat the aptitude test in the first place. So validate, that's obviously a cutting edge, really good tool to have to validate whether or not the right person took the aptitude test if they took the test remotely. If you are supervising tests, of course, you don't need to worry about that at all. So if we think about the way so far that we've seen the system and how it's been designed, you've got the job analysis. So that's at the beginning of the HR cycle, understanding the job. You are doing a bit of recruitment, selection. You're doing the job match. You're assessing personality. You're assessing aptitude. What would you do next in that HR cycle? Well, you need to assess performance, don't you? So 360 performance assessment seems like the next logical step. So that's available as well in the system. Here's an example of how one of the reports might look. I'm not going to say too much about this because I'm going to focus on the third report that I'm going to show you. But this basically gives you a summary of the various competency areas that have been assessed and breaks it down by the group that has rated the individuals. So, for example, the manager, the group of direct reports, group of customers, colleagues, and so on. Here's another one that breaks things further down for you. So this is useful if you would like to develop specific aspects of a competency rather than the more general aspects of a competency. So if you look at the third box along here, while at work, they constantly provide direction to the team raising the stakes. And as you can see, most individuals here, whether it be the manager, the colleague, or even the person themselves, have rated this individual as very low in this area. So that becomes one of the more immediate development needs. So it's really useful that it homes in on specific areas of development and doesn't just stick at that more general level, the more competency level. And finally, here we have all scores summaries. So what you've got here across the top is the group that have rated the individual, whether it be just the person themselves, the manager, or the group of colleagues, the group of direct reports, the group of customers. Those names, those labels you can change, by the way, so you can customize them. We have the competencies down here. I will tell you a little bit more about the competencies in a second, but there's a large number of competencies. There's 40 in the system, and you can choose which ones of those you want. So they're all nicely defined for you, and you can choose which ones you want to assess, because obviously you can't give out 360 performance assessment questionnaires that assess a whole 40 competencies. That's far too many. And in the middle there, you see, of course, all of the scores, and they're color-coded. So basically, an area that's been signified as being a strength by a particular group of people will show up in green, moderate strengths would be orange, development needs would be red. And the thing I had saved and wanted to bring up now is that yes, you can choose from 40 inbuilt and predefined competencies, but you can also add your own custom competencies, and that's pretty good because we have used systems in the past where they require you to stick to their own limited competencies, and those publishers sometimes find it difficult to understand that an organization may have their own custom defined competencies that perhaps they've paid a lot of money to develop. And with this system, you can simply put them into the system, you can put the definitions in there, and then your competencies will show up down the left-hand side, not the publisher's competencies. So that's really, really useful tool to have. And once again, if you think of that journey then through the HR life cycle, what else could we do after 360 assessment? Well, perhaps we can assess culture and we can assess engagement. And that's what this final tool within the system will do. I won't say too much about this one either because I think it's fairly self-explanatory. You can see some of the things that might have been assessed down the left-hand side there. Clarity of vision, diversity, business focus, all those sorts of things. And then across the top, it's basically showing you the extent to which people agree that the organization has that. So in other words, for clarity of vision, it's fairly moderate. So that's perhaps an area that could do with some development. It could be a lot clearer than it is right now. And then if we just look at another one of these, I'm just showing you a couple of screenshots, but there are, of course, many in this particular report. So for the particular area of clarity of vision, as we just saw, it's moderate. The previous survey, actually, there was 1 point less. So it seems to have improved since the last time that this company did this particular survey. You would hope that next time around it improves even more. And then there's a comparison group. So this is quite unique. So you're being shown how your organization fares compared to a comparison group. So then you basically understand, wow, we're not doing quite as well as others because the average there would be a much higher score from other organizations. And what's also useful is the system provides you with a score interpretation, as you can see there in those couple of lines, and some further information about what you can do to improve in this particular area in your organization. So that is a very brief, as quick as I could make it, overview of the reports and a little bit about the system. If you've found all of that interesting, you're probably thinking to yourself now, well, how does it all work? And what do I do to get access to the system? Well, first of all, it's very simple, and we have a video showing you just that. And on the next slide, you can click on the link, and that will take you to the video, which at the very beginning of that video, you'll see a demonstration of just how simple it is to use the system, if you'd like to do that. On the other hand, if you would like us to show it to you, we can give you an online demo as well, so just get in touch with us. Now, as to whether or not you can use the system unsupervised, it really depends on your background in psychometrics. So if you don't have any background at all in psychometrics, we consider you an untrained client, in which case we would be very happy to assist you by using our bureau service. So that basically means you send us details of the people that you want to assess, and we send them the invitations. We manage the process for you. Once they've completed, we send you whatever reports we're able to send you as an untrained client. So as I said towards the beginning of the presentation, we will remove things. We won't provide you with support We will provide you with support, but we won't provide you with reports that may lead to mistakes in interpretation. So usually we provide reports that don't have numbers, that are unlikely to be confusing, and so on. 360, you don't need any training to use that. That's absolutely fine. Culture and engagement is only available if you have your own system. So it's really for the aptitude and the personality assessments that you do need to have training. If you're only using aptitude, then we can block out the personality assessments from your system and vice versa. The upside of Bureau is probably those things that I've just explained. The downside is that you're not going to get all of the reports that are available, and you will pay more because, of course, Bureau would include an admin fee because we're doing it for you. So we really do advise you to go for training so that you can fully understand the system, the tests that are being used, all about aptitude, personality assessment in general as well. And once you have been trained and accredited and you're qualified, you can then purchase the system. When you purchase it, it comes with 400 credits. And then all you need to do is log into the system. You can then manually add your testees, or you can upload them in an Excel file. With some of the systems out there, you can't do that. You still can't do that. But we can do that in our system. Produce the reports once your candidates completed the test, or you can, of course, download the data into an Excel spreadsheet. Again, some of the competitor systems out there, they either don't let you do it or they limit you. So they say if you buy the most expensive report, you can download the data, but if you buy a mid-range report, you can't. We don't limit you like that within this system. Reports, as I've already mentioned, cost varying amounts of credits, and those credits will be deducted from your system on a usage basis. That's it. It's all very simple. So let's move on. So it just remains for me to say thank you very much for spending some time with me here today. I hope you now understand a little bit about the Psychometric Portal. The best way to understand more about it is to watch the video and come to us and ask us any questions that you may have. Thanks very much for viewing the presentation. Please click on the link above to download sample reports. So if you'd like to see some of those reports that I've been showing you in more detail, in a better resolution, then please go ahead and download those. And you can also download the brochure for the Psychometric Portal as well. And please don't hesitate to contact us for any further details, pricing information, or simply just to get started using the Psychometric Portal. Here are our website addresses. You can click on one of those and just click on the most appropriate contact information for you. You can contact us via telephone, via email, and via live online support. Thank you once again, and we wish you all the best.